Sustaining Practices for Perilous Times. My name is Rabbi Jen Queen. I am the Director of Engagement and Reform Rabbi at Harvard Hillel and the University Programs Chair for the Harvard University Chaplains. And I am thrilled to see y'all and really excited for this evening. Sustaining Practices for Perilous Times is a series featuring Harvard University chaplains, faculty, administrators, and other members of our wider Harvard community, offering insight into their personal spiritual practices. So in this space, we define spiritual practice very broadly. We're talking prayer and poetry and movement and mindfulness and cooking and other creative outlets, anything that inspires, cultivates meaning, provides emotional and spiritual sustenance, hope, energy, and courage to press forward during these fractured and difficult times. We are here Thursdays from 5 to 5:30 until April 29th. And we are very excited to welcome another two presenters. At this point, I will kick it to Rachel.
Hi all, I'm Rachel. It looks like at this point the folks who are with us are regulars, so it's so fun to see folks back on the Zoom, and hopefully we'll have a few more people trickle in. I'm Rachel Eichen. I'm the Multi-Faith Engagement Fellow based in the Memorial Church, and I'm so excited to introduce our two presenters this week. We'll be hearing first from Dean Katie O'Dare, and who is the Dean of Students at Harvard College. And then we'll be hearing from Adnan Woodsmith, who is the denominational counselor for Muslim students at HDS and who is a PhD candidate. And also who I'm super excited to get to introduce because I knew Adnan when I was a student at Brown and he was a chaplain. So this is very fun for me on a personal note. So I'll pass it over now to Dean O'Dare.
Thank you so much, Rachel and Rabbi Jen, and to everyone joining here and virtually with the recording. So I think the timing of this invitation was really good for me. You know, I want to talk today about three sort of sustaining practices that I have. You know, we have been all through a collective experience over the past year, you know, but no one of us has kind of experienced this collectively. It's all been really individually. And so we're coming out of hibernation and we're looking around to see like if everyone is okay. You know, so I think, you know, I will say that at the outside of the pandemic, I took the sort of approach that an unprecedented time calls for unprecedented response, meaning that I need to go full in on like self-care. You know, I like podcasts and apps and books. I sort of got it all together, you know, whatever would sort of help my, you know, my self-care. But I quickly realized that I already had what I needed in the practices that I do every day and that I've done for years. But what I really needed to do was to do them more intentionally. And so I needed them more than ever. So the three sustaining practices that I want to share is the first is journaling. It seems simple, but I journal every single day. And I start my day with journal and a cup of coffee. And I start my day with gratitude. I ask God every day to open my road, to sharpen my mind, to do and to help kind of pave the way to leave lingering worry behind so I can be my best self for those who I need to support during the day. You know, I write down my dreams. I find dreams to be very telling, and I talk with others about my dreams. I interpret them. I set my intention for the day at that time, you know, and at night I reflect on my day in my journal, sort of what went well, what I needed to learn from the day. And part of that daily reflection is reading a book called The Four Agreements. So I don't know if anyone is familiar with the book called The Four Agreements. It's really like a standard for me. And you know, I've been reading this for nearly 2 decades, and it has come into popularity over the past probably 5 or 10 years. It's by Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. I don't know if my background, I should take my background off, but and you know, the four agreements basically say the following. It says, the first is, and I'm going to read these out of the book so that I don't get them wrong. Be impeccable with your word. Speak with integrity. Say only what you mean. Avoid using the word to speak against yourself or to gossip about others. Use the power of your word in the direction of truth and love. I'll pause there by saying, one thing I'm known for is that I am not a gossip. So no one comes to me with gossip because I won't participate. And if I'm around it, I find my way out of it because one of the things I learned early on, and this has been years now, that it doesn't serve anyone well. And when you read this agreement, which is the first agreement in Ruiz's book, you really understand that one way that you can contribute to positivity is with your word. The second is don't take anything personally. Nothing others do is because of you. What others say and do is a projection of their own reality, their own dream. When you are immune to the opinions and actions of others, you won't be the victim of needless suffering. So this is the hardest one, taking anything personally. And when I think a little bit about the past year, I usually draw on a bank account analogy. In my field, working with students, I am used to having sort of this incoming into the bank account, which is interactions with students, positive interactions with students. Going to culture events, religious events, going to sporting events, really being able to engage one-on-one with my advisees. And this year that doesn't exist because none of us are together. But it's even more so this year when everyone is unhappy. And when I say everyone is unhappy, students are unhappy. I would understand that. Our staff is unhappy. Parents are not happy about just in general. And so I think I have to remind myself not to take some of that personally, because it's really about what an individual is going through, and I can't take that on. I can't take that on for the institution. I can have compassion and I can have understanding. And I think when I don't take things personally, I am I have much more empathic ability to be there to support the students and the staff who rely on me and on my team. So the third is don't make assumptions. Find the courage to ask questions and to express what you really want. Communicate with others as clearly as you can to avoid misunderstandings, sadness, and drama. With just this one agreement, you can completely transform your life. I will sort of look around the grid. Has anyone made an assumption about something that someone has said or done ever? Raise your hand. Yeah, well, you can raise your virtual hand or yes. So guilty as charged. I've done that as well. And it's easy then to spiral into taking something personally that you've assumed the intention of someone. And then by extension, saying something that you regret, but that might be perceived as unkind. So I think that is a great reminder. And then the fourth agreement is always do your best. Your best is going to change from moment to moment. It will be different when you're healthy as opposed to sick. Under any circumstance, simply do your best, and you will avoid self-judgment, self-abuse, and regret. And so when I think a little bit about my day, and I have to just be perfectly honest, and the reason why I read this book every day is that at some point during the day, I break one of those agreements to myself. And I think over the past year, it's probably been multiple points during my day, and where I don't keep those agreements. And the agreements are for myself. They're not for anyone else, and I think it really is. It's always helpful to me to revisit and to remind. And the always do your best component of this is is about getting up the next day, and you get a free opportunity to start again. And so I think those two practices go hand in hand for me: the journaling and the reading the four agreements. I think the last one is, I'm originally from Ohio. It's my home, and one of the great poets born in Ohio is Mary Oliver. She actually passed away 2 years ago. If you're familiar with Mary Oliver, she is a nature writer, and she writes incredibly illustrative, about animals, and about rock streams and meadows, and shorelines, and her poetry speaks to me in so many different ways. So one of the practices that I will do is I have her anthology now, which came out 2 years ago. If you like Mary Oliver, I would recommend all of her poems are in this one book. And I will open it, and the poem that comes off the page is kind of my poem for the day. I do that in the morning. So I see that I'm sort of out of time, but I just wanted, those are my 3 practices that I wanted to share. Thanks.
Thank you so much for sharing. We'll have time for some questions and conversation at the end, and I'll pass it over now to Adnan.
Thank you very much, everyone, from being here. I heard Rachel mention that it seems like everyone else on the call is a regular. So I guess Dino there and I are the ones who are guests in many different ways to this program. So thank you for having me here as part of this program, and thank you for making time today to connect on this kind of material of what sustains us and what keeps us going. When Rachel first reached out to me about this, a few things came to mind thinking about sustaining practices that have kept me going. But one came to the top, and the origin of it, I want to start with a story, something that happened about 3 years ago. Was it 3 years? Yeah, almost 3 years ago in the summer of 2018. That was the last time, well, actually, let me backtrack a bit before that. 2014, summer of 2014 was when I took up the position as the Muslim chaplain at Brown University, going from a community in California, a Muslim community, where I really felt like I was just part of the community. My spiritual needs were met, and I was just part of the puzzle, if you will. Going from that context, and then knowing that at Brown, I would have to be the source of spiritual sustenance for others in many ways, and there weren't going to be many resources in terms of teachers in the Islamic tradition and various people that I could draw from on the area. So I made a promise to myself when I took up the position, that in order for me to be for this position to be sustainable for me, I committed to myself to visiting the teachers of my teachers in Mauritania, which is this village that I set as my background. It's a lot more interesting than my 2-year-old son's bedroom, which is my actual background here, which also serves as our office during the day. Going to Mauritania and Senegal every year. There are these two villages. One here in Mauritania is the one behind me, and then there's one in Senegal as well, where my teachers are found in both places. And so I told myself I would go there to get my spiritual sustenance every year. The last time I was there was summer of 2018, and we had just prayed the night prayer in the evening, and I found myself in a small room in one of my teachers' house, with about 12.5 people packed into that room, and everyone was quiet, except they had their beads out, the prayer remembrance beads, and then every so often one of them would say Allahu Akbar. I would say Allahu Akbar, which in Arabic means God is greatest, or God is greater. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. And so I asked one of my teachers, what's going on in this room? And he said, well, every night we get together in this room and collectively recite 1,000,000 recitations of Ya Latif, which is calling upon the name of God in the Islamic tradition of Latif, which is the subtly kind or gentle. He said the reason we do this is just to essentially pray for the world, and particularly for our students, and just pray for mercy and gentleness and suffer kindness for our students. So everyone is doing a recitation around their prayer beads of 1,000 Ya Latif. Every time they reach 1,000, they'll say Allahu Akbar, and someone else is keeping the tally. And so they go and someone else keeps that tally of 1,000 thousands. And when they reach a million, they do a short prayer together and then conclude the evening. And I was really impacted by that gathering, just the sense, feeling, just being in that room with that spiritual energy. It's seeing these people around me who were simultaneously connected to their creator, but also connected to each other, connected simultaneously, vertically and horizontally. And then also connected to me and students like me who are all kinds of other places in the world. They were making a prayer for us every night with these 1 million recitations of Ya Latif. So that stuck in my mind from back then. Now fast forward to March of 2020, I'm gearing up to, during spring break, to finally, it's been longer than a year, it's been almost 2 years. I feel like my heart can't bear it. I'm finally getting a chance during spring break to return to Boubacar, this village in Mauritania, and Medina Bay in Senegal. And 4 days before my friend and I leave, my friend being a new initiate into our spiritual path that we were a part of. And so I knew this was kind of a once in a lifetime opportunity for him too. 4 days before we left, then it just became clear that these shutdowns were serious. If we arrived at Dakar in Senegal, they weren't going to let us into the country at all unless we stayed on the runway for 2 weeks quarantined, which wasn't really possible. And so that was the beginning of COVID getting real for me, not just physically and in terms of just having that kind of physical emotional fear going out, seeing everyone else stressed out and anxious, especially at the grocery store and everything, but really having the spiritual effects of that I couldn't connect with my spiritual teachers anymore. So I was sitting with that fear that we all felt during COVID, and continue to feel, and asked one of my teachers in Senegal over WhatsApp what kind of remembrance we could do for protection for that. And he said, well, you can do 65 repetitions of this particular prayer, which is called Jawharat al-Kamal. I'm just going to share it quickly. So this is the prayer. I was going to recite it for you, but in the interest of time, I'll refrain from that. But as you can tell, no matter what column you look at, whether you read the Arabic or the transliteration of the English, it's quite a long prayer. And my teacher said, you can, for protection from any kind of affliction, do this prayer 65 times every night. And so I sat with that and I thought, okay, that's not really sustainable for me as a sustainable practice. But then a few days later, one of my friends in our common spiritual path reached out to me and said, hey, do you want to break up those 65 Jawharat al-Kamal prayer? We can do them together and on behalf of each other. And I said, actually, that's a good idea. And then when he mentioned that, I said, you know what, there are actually one or two other people who I think we could involve in this. So pretty much what happened within a few days after that then is something that's been continuing ever since. Is we now have a text group. It was 4 of us a few months ago. One of the other students had to drop out. So now it's 3 of us. So this was just yesterday's screenshots. That a lot of it is kind of incomprehensible if you look at it, but we have each one kind of posts a greeting, and then we number off in counts of 7 more or less because of the blessedness of that number 7. Saying here, I've done 7, and then we say at the beginning we would say, oh, I've done 7, I've done 14. Became confusing, kind of tracking the count for everyone. So we decided to update everyone. Every update is, well, this is the number that I've reached based on. This is the number that we seem like we've reached collectively based on what I just did. So you see, we last night we started around 9 o'clock. And then the last person contributed shortly after sunrise, so it took us a few hours to get it done the other night. But we reached that 65, and then the last person to finish then gives a short prayer, and then both the two of us remaining, we said Amin, which in the Islamic tradition is comparable to Amen that many of us are familiar with. And so this is a practice which has really, I didn't know all the benefits that this would have when I started it, but have felt it after practicing this for now more than a year. Feeling connected with other people in a way that takes very minimal effort, but allows us to kind of keep tabs on each other. The few times when one or two of us will not post to the group all night, I'll reach out the next day and say, everything going okay? And often that person has gotten sick or something's happened in their life. And so it's a kind of regular check-in, but then it's a collective kind of spiritual check-in in a way, which is really minimal effort. I just post a few words. It takes me just a few seconds and then take care of this prayer on my own. And it's really helped in giving us this sense of agency, a sense of community, and a sense of competence too, all three of which the pandemic has really taken away from us in many ways. So then just quickly to conclude, if anyone else wants to kind of incorporate something like this, then for me, the place to start is to determine some kind of devotional or personal goal that you might want to connect with others on, form some kind of group. We decided a text group because WhatsApp, there were just too many messages for us to keep up on. And then we kind of ironed out the kinks as the days went on, and then pretty soon just got into a rhythm, and it just became natural, and something that I think even after the pandemic is done, I don't really want to pass up. But it's really helped us go through these pandemic times.
Thank you so much, Adnan. Oh, I see, Dino Dare, that you put a hand up.
So Adnan, this is fascinating. I love the community aspect. One question I have is, do you do this every night?
Yep. It's every single night until since we started in March of last year. So sometimes one of us will miss a bit, and the others will cover. We have a rule that if we haven't met the 65 by the morning, then it's kind of fair game. Anyone gets to complete it and just make sure it's done. But yeah, every night we do.
That's awesome. Wow. At this point, we have a few minutes for questions or reflections from our audience. If anybody has specific questions, either for Dino Dare or for Adnan, let us know.
Go by Katie. Thank you, Jen.
Sorry, Katie. Yeah, Hannah.
Thank you so much, both Katie and Adnan. Those were such lovely presentations. The question I always have in the back of my mind for these presentations, and Adnan, you may have actually hinted at your answer in your final comments, is do you think you'll be carrying these practices with you as the pandemic ends and as we, go back to normal? Do you think they'll look the same? Do you think they'll change a bit? How do you see those continuing?
It's a great question. I mean, I think one of the things I learned early on was that these were my go-tos. I've been doing them for years. I tried other practices that didn't stick because they didn't sustain me. And so I suspect, yes, I will continue to post-pandemic, mostly because I love looking back on my journals. I looked back just last night on my journals from a year ago when March, when we had to de-densify campus and it was chaotic and crazy. And I think about where we are now and where we were then and what we've been through over the past year. So I'm not going to change much because I think it works for me.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, I think I've just benefited so much from kind of that sense of community that it requires such minimal effort. That it's something that maybe we'll be a little less ambitious, maybe cut down, choose some other thing to do collectively. But in general, this daily practice, I think the three of us who've been doing it, we're going to keep it up. Yeah.
Adnan, were you raising your hand?
I was. It's so interesting. It's so much of this Zoom stuff is so unnatural. But anyway, I wanted to ask. I was going to say Dino there, but Katie, then ask Katie just what the inspiration was originally for it. You said this, the book has been the Four Agreements has been something that you've been returning to for 20 years. I think you said over 20 years, and just wondering who or what brought that book into your life initially.
So that's interesting. My sister gave me this book, and I can't remember. She gave me this book right when it came out. It was sort of like in the late 90s. It hasn't been quite, and I didn't pick it up like for the first several years. And so it sort of sat there. It was pretty, and she's like, "You've got to read this book. It's great." I'm like, yeah. You know, people recommend books all the time. She gave it to me. It sort of sat on my shelf, and I don't know why I picked it up. I actually don't know why I picked it up, but the minute I picked it up, I was sort of taken over by the messaging in it, and it really helped me. It really truly has helped me have a different lens on how I interact with others and what I can and cannot take on about others' behavior, but also my own, the things that I bring to things that I do. So it was my sister who gave it to me, and it was years later, probably 4 or 5 years later, that I actually read it.
Oh, thank you for sharing.
Thank you for asking.
Also just say, you know, I mean, we've done a lot of these presentations and, you know, had everyone bring something different and beautiful, and like, you know, and often, you know, citing specific authors, poets, artists that are particularly inspiring to them. And I was so excited when I saw that you were bringing the Four Agreements. I read it with my mom. I must have been maybe 12. It was probably close to when it came out, I guess. And I have come back to it so many times, and it has really shaped who I am as a person as well. And you know, and it's really powerful to hear you talk about it and to hear how it's been a tool and how it's served you. So thank you. Thank you so much, Adnan and Katie, for your time, for sharing your experience and your wisdom and your practices with us. These practices of repetition are so beautiful and so instructive in their similarities and in their differences. And I, you know, I talk about this with, you know, as Judaism as a text-based religion, you know, we come back to the same core text and the same prayers, you know, as it sounds like you both do in these particular ways, you know, again and again and again. And the same words on the page stay the same, but we come back to them each time a little bit differently.
That's exactly right.
Right.
And we get to kind of, you know, track our own progress and feel grounded in their sameness, but in our changing each time we're able to come back to them. And so thank you both for bringing that and bringing those ideas to life for us today. Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation. Yeah. Thank you to all of you.
Yeah, thank you for that perspective, Rabbi Jen. And yeah, once again, thank you everyone for being with us.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, y'all. Hope you have a great evening. Stay well, and we hope to see you at the same time next week.